Uh, all right, good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to the Virginia Beach Master Gardeners Garden Talk and Workshops event tonight. Our topic tonight is called Bees, the Good, the Bad, and the Ugly. Our presenter tonight is Frank Walker. This presentation will provide an update regarding the latest research on bees and how we can support them. Beekeepers alone cannot sustain the colonies, and we'll talk about why it's necessary to plant native plants. The presentation will be about 50 minutes in length with 10 minutes at the end for questions. Please mute your speaker and take yourself off video to prevent any distractions. The chat box will be open for questions for Frank. Candy one of our co-hosts, will collate the questions for Frank to answer. If you have any ideas to share with other participants, please save those for another format. Before you leave the presentation, please complete the very short poll that you will find to the right of the chat box at the bottom of your screen. The poll will open as we open the forum for questions. Again, our presenter tonight is Frank Walker, and let me tell you a little bit about Frank Walker. The city of Norfolk had a 50-plus year ban on prohibiting residents from having honeybee hives on their property. In 2012, Frank Walker took the opportunity to educate the Norfolk City officials of the tremendous benefit pollinators provide, as well as highlighted other cities that welcomed their residents to learn the art of beekeeping. The mayor and the city council held a public session and without opposition lifted the ban on managed honeybee colonies in the city of Norfolk. Before the ink was dry, Frank Walker established the Norfolk Beekeepers. Norfolk Beekeepers is a partner in education with Virginia Beach Public Schools. In 2017, the Norfolk Beekeepers were selected as a model partner for their work with Kellam High School. Frank annually presents elementary, middle, and high school students with pollinator environmental programs, as well as manages honeybee colonies at numerous public and private schools in Tidewater. Frank also manages the full-time observation hive in the barnyard at the Virginia Zoo in Norfolk. Please welcome Frank Walker.
Well, good afternoon, good evening, everyone. It was a pleasure being invited and having an opportunity to speak. I'm gonna try to share my screen. And I guess people can tell me if it is there or not.
Yeah, Frank, it is.
Okay, I guess someone just give me a shout out. You can see the cover screen, the first slide.
We can, Frank.
Awesome, well, thank you. So we titled this presentation, The Good, the Bad, the Ugly, about you, me, and the honeybee, and effectively all of our pollinators. The good, Virginia Beach Master Gardeners monthly Zoom talks, you for joining us today, beekeepers, and it's the commitment to promote and protect our pollinators. Many of you might know or may not know, Virginia Beach is a certified bee city. And then we're asking everybody to pledge to plant for pollinators in 2022. The bad is homeowners and their impact on the environment and some of the contamination of our air, soil, and other vegetation, and homeowner behavior towards our fish, our birds, and other wildlife. The ugly is some of the instances we've had dealing with some of the small business owners and surface water contamination, groundwater contamination, and soil contamination by some of the practices that they employ on their property. So the ugly, I'm going in reverse order. So again, it's some of the things that we have seen in the past few years, and we're just trying to ask everyone to educate all of our neighbors, our business owners, just let people know how their impact is impacting the environment and the world we live in. Pesticides, we all use the word pesticide. Some people really don't understand what a pesticide is, but it's any substance or mixture of substances intended for preventing, destroying, or repelling or mitigating a pest, and uses as a plant regulator, defoliant, and sometimes used as a nitrogen stabilizer. And again, pesticides are substances that are meant to control pests, but some people just freely apply pesticides. And again, we're seeing a lot of this in our small business owners. But most of us hear about the herbicide, insecticide, fungicide. It's one of the most common terms that we talk about. But basically, people have label warnings. A lot of people don't pay attention. They think if it says put, 1 cup per gallon, they think 3 cups per gallon is better. And we're seeing a lot of contamination from pesticides in our waterways. A lot of our studies have shown that our major river basins, more than 90% of the water and fish samples from all the streams had several kinds of pesticide contamination. Again, I ask questions. Do you know pesticides can contaminate our soil, our water, our turf, and other vegetation? In addition to killing insects or weeds, pesticides can be toxic to a host of other organisms, including our birds, our fish, and beneficial insects, and also our non-target plants. Insecticides are generally most accurately toxic class of pesticides, but herbicides can also pose a risk. So we're seeing a lot of our small businesses that are freely dispensing chemicals and pesticides on their property for many reasons. They think it's something beneficial for their company, but we're finding that it's impacting our landscapes and our pollinators and our wildlife. And honeybees forage for water. So they go to our waterways and they pick up water to bring back to the hive, and the water is contaminated. Now that contaminates the hive as well. Motor oil, we're still finding businesses and even homeowners that are pouring motor oil down the storm drains, along their ditch banks, on their property. And people just don't understand that motor oil never wears out. It gets dirty, it can be recycled and cleaned and used again. And as they pour and dispense of these oils, it's contaminating our groundwater, our streams and rivers. 1 pint, or 16 ounces of oil can produce an oil slick covering an acre of water. So a lot of our new developments have those retention ponds kind of in the middle of the property, and they build houses all around and direct all the storm drains. And 16 ounces of oil can put a 1 acre oil slick over that entire retention pond. And another quarter oil can contaminate 1 million gallons of water. And a lot of this water does not go through our treatment facilities. And so we're finding that's a big impact to our environment and to our wildlife. The homeowner, we talk about homeowners' behavior, the longest lasting impact. Again, homeowners dispensing chemicals. They'll go to the garden center, get a 3-gallon backpack sprayer, they'll get a chemical, and they'll come load it up and think they're doing something beneficial for their lawn, but that behavior is harming, non-target plants, fish, birds, and other wildlife. So we encourage people, when they see their neighbor or a business owner dispensing chemicals, feel empowered to walk over, introduce yourself, say, hey, what are you doing? And why are you doing it that way? One of the questions we get a whole lot is about this little critter. Some of you might know what that is, but that is a mole. And, they eat insects. They eat earthworms, grubs, insects, and larvae. They live deep underground in dens, under trees, sidewalks, buildings, but they have tunnels, and when homeowners see these tunnels going through their lawn, and it makes them mad. that upsets them. And basically, that is their freeway to where they feed. There's another little critters, a vole. And voles are vegetarians, basically. It's in the mouse rat family, but they live underground. Uh, Oftentimes use the same tunnels as our moles do, but as homeowners, they have a tendency to get upset. But again, moles occupy well-maintained lawns. They're beneficial. They're aerating your soil by eating the grubs, and they keep beetle larvae in check without the need for insecticides. Moles live 4 to 6 feet underground. Looks something like this. So when you have those tunnels in your yard, the den could actually be in your neighbor's yard or 2 neighbors down. Um, and but there's a lot of recommendations that you'll see on the internet and the garden centers about saturating the ground with these chemicals, and this, they say it takes 2 to 3 years to drive the moles away. Well, that's worrisome to our people. They're natural repellents. There's a lot of information about castor oil being utilized, but homeowners, again, they get upset about um, an animal that's eating grubs and other insects that then would go through their larval stage, pupa stage, and emerge and then start eating our other plants. So poisons are usually the first thing that the homeowner thinks about to combat the moles and voles. Again, various methods, chewing gum, vibration, ultrasonic devices, they've been proven to be very ineffective. Mothballs don't work, and it's illegal because a mothball is considered a pesticide. And then they have poisoned gummy worms or pellets that basically you put into their tunnels, but then that opens that up for other wildlife, pets, dogs, cats. Um, and if you leave the poison in place, then the rain comes and it'll wash it into our environment. So now our waterways are getting poisoned as well. So I just tell people, note to self, if you aren't willing to lick it or drink it before you put it on the ground, don't use it. Because once it's applied on the ground, we consume it through our plants, the wildlife, the fish, and the seafood that we consume. But it's every year we just get inundated with requests about moles and voles and how they can target them and eliminate them from their landscape. And we just encourage people to understand that they're playing a vital role in insect control. And by poisoning the earth, we in turn poison ourselves. Wasp, hornets, and yellow jackets. We say they're beneficial insects. They're bug predators and nature's insecticide. They feed their young on insects that would otherwise damage crops and ornamental plants in your garden. They feed on house flies and blowfly larvae. Wasp and yellow jackets, as you know, can be aggressive when their nests are approached. But a lot of people are using chemicals to dispense. So we say if there's a yellow jacket nest that you see here, or we call them ground bees, a lot of people do. If you have to remove them because of where they made their nest, then basically we use like a apple cider vinegar, dish soap mixture mixed with water and put it in a garden sprayer. And then we spray the nest at nighttime when they're less apt to fly. But the biggest thing is we're seeing a lot of people using bug sprays and chemicals to spray these pollinators. Paper wasp, ball-faced hornet, same thing. These are annual bees. I'll talk about their life cycle here in a little bit, but they're predators. They're eating non-beneficial insects that are in our garden. But people have a fear of flying insects. And the ball-faced hornet on the right-hand side, that's that paper nest that they make. All of that entire colony dies in the fall. They will not come and reuse that nest. So it's a one and done type thing. But we're still seeing homeowners, small business owners spraying and killing all these bees. which in turn takes all the predators away. Non-beneficial insects have no threat, so they multiply freely. Homeowner sees their plants getting eaten. They go to a garden center, they get a chemical, dispense this chemical, and that kills all of our other pollinators as well. So it just has an impact. So the life cycle of the wasp, early spring, you don't see them in the wintertime. Basically, a mated queen overwinters in a brush pile underground somewhere. And in the spring, she emerges, and then she will build the first portion of the nest that I just showed you. And then she will lay eggs. And basically, she's going to lay female eggs, the worker bees. They chew up wood, mix it with saliva, and make paper, basically. So the queen makes her a few cells, and then she raises a few worker bees that take over the colony production, and her job is just to lay eggs. Towards the end of the summer, the colony is peaked, and the queen starts producing a few eggs that develop into queens and fertile males. And then the decline of the colony is in the fall. As the weather cools, the queen quits laying, she dies. The remaining wasp have no commitment to the nest. And then basically the new queens mate, then they basically burrow underground and hibernate over the winter and then come out the next year. And that's when you're seeing right now wasp, a few hornets, that type of thing, but people are still using chemicals and pesticides, freely dispensing them across the environment, creating some problems. So we encourage people, please don't spray. Parasitic wasps, those are eggs actually there. It looks kind of like a paper wasp, has a little bit thinner waist type thing, but they're another partner that helps control other insects, and you can see the list of insects that are there. But when you wipe out all of our predators, now all of these, the caterpillars, the flies, leafhoppers, roaches, and such, just multiply without threat, and it's becoming an issue in our gardens and across our environment. Again, we encourage people, don't spray. Bumblebees and carpenter bees. Right now, most people are seeing the carpenter bees darting all around. The ones you see darting all around are the males, the boy bee. The ones that are drilling the hole in your fascia board or your fence post or your deck railing, that's the female bee. They're declining just like our bumblebees. If you look at the picture there, the bumblebee has the fuzzy yellow abdomen. The carpenter bee has a little bit of color based on its thorax, but its abdomen is shiny. But both of them are beneficial for pollinating tomatoes, cucumbers, blueberries, and different crops. Bumblebees are used a lot in greenhouse for peppers, tomatoes, I guess strawberries and that type of thing. But they're at free falling to their death as well because of environmental hazards. They overwinter. That whole nest on the right-hand side, it's a bumblebee nest, looks like a bunch of marbles. They will overwinter. A mated queen, but that entire colony that you see there, it would perish. The carpenter bee, that's what they're doing as well. They're building a nest. The rough and tumble you see is in the mating of the male and female. The female go get some pollen, some nectar, comes back, lays an egg, and packs it around that egg. And then those eggs hatch, and then they pupate through the wintertime, then emerge as an adult bee in the spring. And that's what you're seeing right now. But still, people are still spraying our bumblebees and carpenter bees. For whatever reason, they don't like the carpenter bee because it's drilling a hole. It looks worse than it is. And in live events, I have a couple of pieces of wood that has carpenter bees that have drilled through it. and you can see that it's not weakening the structure. Again, it's just disturbing to see, but it's really your house is not going to collapse like if it was a termite infestation. Bees, especially our native bees, um, and beetles, flies, moths, butterflies, bats, and other mammals. There are about 4,000 species of native bees in the United States. About 400 live in Virginia. But silently, billions of honeybees are dying all over the country, and that's putting our food chain in danger. Honeybees don't make honey. We say they're a giant, humble workforce, pollinated 80 food crops that we grow here in Virginia. But in recent years, we're losing a large number of our bees, which is potentially devastating to our ability to grow our own food. Uh, Managed honeybee colonies, the American Beekeeping Federation requests annual reports. So beekeepers that are managing colonies note how many colonies they have like in October. And now March, April, how many bees made it through the wintertime, how many colonies. In the last 10 years, it's roughly been between 45 and 50% of the bees in Virginia managed honeybee colonies have perished over the wintertime. Nationwide, it's been a little bit lower, 35 to 40%. But in Virginia, part of it is the weather. Um, Here it gets cold, and then oftentimes in January, February, we'll have those 75 to 80-degree days for a week or so. And that's a false sense of spring to the bees. Then the queen bee will start laying eggs, and then it gets real cold, kind of like it did today. And then the bees can't cover that brood, and they will starve to death trying to protect that brood, and that colony will perish. Um, but again, we're just encouraging everyone to, and most people say, well, I would never do that. No, you wouldn't, but you know somebody that would. So that's why the communication, the networking, and if it's having to hold somebody's hand, hey, don't do that to our environment. Um, so this is a flyer. The left-hand side shows a swarm of honeybees. That's nature's way of reproduction. So we lose 40% of our bees. So beekeeper's got 10 colonies, 4 of them die. So he's got 6 strong colonies coming out of the wintertime. Now with the abundance of blooming plants, the honeybees decide they're going to swarm. So they take the queen and they quit feeding the queen, and they kind of force her out of the hive, and she'll fly into a cluster like you see here. She's embedded in the middle of that cluster. She has no communication. She has no direction to the bees on where to go or how to go. The colony that they left, they're making a queen. She will go on a mating flight, and they open mate in flight. And if that queen bee does not make it back to the colony, then that colony will perish. They get one chance to make a queen. Once they make that one queen and she goes on her mating flight, and if a dragonfly eats her, or a bluebird, or she gets hit by a truck, um, without beekeeper intervention, that entire colony will collapse. But 6 times last year, a homeowner, a small business owner, called us up and said they had a swarm. Before we could get a beekeeper there, they had sprayed and killed the bees. So we said, well, if 6 people called us and then sprayed and killed the bees, how many people aren't calling us at all? So that's why we made up the flyer. It kind of tells you that, we're relying on beneficial vegetable crops, fruits and vegetables, and our honeybees help us do that. So I got the little bee facts there. So most of the honeybees that you ever see are called the foragers. They're the oldest bee in the colony. And basically, they're all female. So an average colony this time of the year that made it through the wintertime, they're just starting to build up, will probably have 30,000 bees in it. There'd be one queen, the mother queen. There'd be about 25,000 worker bees, all girls, and about 3,000 or 4,000 boys, drones. And in the honeybee world, the girls do all the work. Can you imagine a world where the girls do all the work? Well, that's the honeybee world. And the queen, people say, well, I'm the queen bee. You do not want to be the queen. The queen is a slave to the colony. This time of the year, she's laying 1,500 to 2,000 eggs a day. And if she doesn't do a good job, instead of swarming, they'll go and sequester her somewhere in a colony. They'll make a few other queens. And if one of those queens goes on a mating flight and comes back, then they will take mama and kill her and throw her out the front door. So survival of the fittest with the honeybees. Pollination, again, 80% of our insect pollination for our 80 food crops in Virginia. But my favorite fun fact, the bees you see out flying around, all foragers, called our worker bees, 556 workers traveling over 55,000 miles, visiting 2 million flowers to make 1 pound of honey. That little honey bear that you see in a grocery store, that's what it takes. And a single bee contributes 5 drops of honey in her lifetime. Mother queen, undisturbed, lives 2 to 3 years. Worker bees, they live 45 days, 6 weeks this time of the year. And the drones, boys, if they go on a mating flight and mate, they die. And then in the fall, if they didn't mate, the girls throw them out of the hive and they die. So that's kind of the life cycle of our honeybees. But again, we're still having people spray and kill our bees. And that's why we made this flyer. And as I said, one of the beekeepers that I called, he was 2 houses down from where they called about the swarm. It was his bees. He was there within 5 minutes, and this homeowner had already sprayed and killed the bees. So again, we encourage people, stop the insanity. Just don't do it. Just don't spray and kill our bees. Again, swarms, they could land anywhere. They're not aggressive. They're not looking to sting you. Beekeeper will come and collect the swarm, and then they would take them and rehive them in a colony. A lot of times we give them to new beekeepers, but that's what it looks like when people spray and kill our bees. So that was a swarm that got sprayed by a homeowner. The bees were taken, and before they got to where they were going, they were dead. But of course, this particular homeowner didn't tell us they sprayed and killed the bees until we called them back. And they said, oh yeah, I forgot to tell you that. So again, message, please don't spray and kill our pollinators. The good, beekeepers. So the good, Virginia Beach Master Gardeners holding these monthly Zoom talks. Again, thanking you for joining. And then your personal commit to promote and protect our pollinators. A beekeeper, what's a beekeeper? I say a beekeeper is you and me. And then we ask everyone to pledge to plant for pollinators in 2022 and beyond. So a beekeeper is anyone who understands the importance of the amazing honeybee and always promotes and protects them. It's not the one with the bugs in the box. The success of every honeybee colony solely depends upon everyone in the 1 mile, 2 mile, 3 mile circle around the beehive. People's poor environmental behavior directly impacts the health of the hive. So I have bees at the Virginia Zoo, have a full-time observation hive in the barn. So you draw a 1 mile, 2 mile, 3 mile circle around the Virginia Zoo. I got bees at Lansdowne Elementary, draw a 1 mile, 2 mile, 3 mile circle around Lansdowne. So as a beekeeper, it matters not what I do. It matters what everybody living in that 1 mile, 2 mile, 3 mile circle does that contributes to the health of my colony. Back in the day, my dad was a big gardener. He would go and buy Sevens dust and freely just throw Sevens dust everywhere. Well, 1 bee picks it up, 2 bees pick it up, 10 bees pick it up, 20 bees pick it up, 50 bees pick it up. Now my colony is filled with Sevens dust and it kills my colony. And it has nothing to do with the person with the bugs in the box. It has to do with people and them not understanding how their behaviors impact our ability to grow our own food in Virginia. So a swarm, that's a picture of a swarm. That was early April. I said, that's a 5-star homeowner. They called us and said they had a swarm. Again, it occurs naturally throughout the spring and summer. The colony forces the mother queen out of the hive. Again, it's a risk to the parent colony. They become queenless until that virgin queen hatches and goes on a mating flight if she doesn't come back. So if we didn't catch this particular swarm on that fence, then those bees might go into a hollow of a tree. They might go into the eave of your house. There's any number of places that they've started to build a colony. But if they don't have enough time to build a colony and then collect food to fill for the wintertime, that colony will perish. So that's why we're encouraging homeowners, small business owners, and the entire community to call a beekeeper when they see a swarm. Sometimes that swarm will be there for 10 minutes. Sometimes it'll be there for a day or two. But speed is of the essence. I got a phone call a couple of days ago from Parks and Rec, City of Virginia Beach. Had a swarm right next to their parking lot. They videotaped it, and I was dispensing somebody to catch them. And within 10 minutes, the whole colony had left. So what you see in that picture is the queen is embedded in that colony somewhere, but scout bees are out looking for a new home, kind of like baby bear, mama bear, daddy bear. Too hot, too cold, too big, too rough. Scout bees are looking out for the perfect home. And once they decide what they think is the perfect home, then that entire colony leaves that fence and they will go move into whatever access that they find. Again, a couple of more swarms, as you can see, high up in the tree, but it's deceiving. That was only about 8 feet up, so that was pretty easy to get to. The one on the right-hand side was on the ground. We have special equipment. We have a bee vac that we would go and vacuum those bees into like a 7-gallon bucket. And it'll look something like this. So that's a swarm on the left-hand side. On the right-hand side is a bee bucket, and you can see the ventilation holes in it. So that particular swarm, I went and took that bucket and just slipped over top of that entire swarm, and then used a pair of cutters and just snipped the branch off and gently set those bees in that bucket, put that top on, and then walked away with that swarm. The box on the right-hand side is brand new bee equipment that was came from the Department of Agriculture, where you could apply for a bee grant. Basically, they would send you up to 3 beehives. Well, through some of the schools, the teachers and such, a couple of them applied. One of them won 3 beehives. So the students at the Brock Environmental Center, they assembled the equipment, painted the equipment. And so that evening, we put those bees in that box at the Brock Environmental Center in Virginia Beach. And then went back on Saturday and put that little stand in, put the wood in. And so basically from a homeowner's phone call to a bee bucket, to a temporary hive, and now a permanent addition to the Brock Environmental Science Program under Virginia Beach Public Schools. And we have 2 students that are fulfilling their senior project utilizing that swarm. So that's a win-win. Homeowner did the right thing. The state provided free equipment. The students invested in assembling it, painting it, and having it ready for this time of the year. There's 2 of the students there. Picture on the left is a smoker. So we use a smoker. It's kind of like right now you're on this Zoom meeting. You might be paying attention, you might not. But if somebody walked in your front door or in your office or wherever you may be that you didn't know, and they were loud and abrupt, it would startle you. You'd want them to ring the doorbell. You would want them to announce themselves. Well, a smoker is the doorbell. Beekeepers, before we go on a beehive, we'll light a smoker like that, let that fire burn down and just have it smoldering where a light smoke comes off of it, not real hot. And then we would take the top off the bees a little bit, put some smoke inside, and that's calming to the bees because in nature, smoke means fire, and the bees will gorge themselves on honey if they think they have to abandon their nest. But bees communicate with a pheromone, so they have an alarm pheromone. So that smoke masks that alarm pheromone as well, and it keeps the bees in a gentle nature. The 2 students you see on the right-hand side, they're holding new frames. So again, that was donated. We had to assemble them, but it was donated by the state of Virginia through the Department of Agriculture. But what you see in the middle, the yellow is plastic cell foundation. It's hexagon printed cells and it's got wax on it. And so we give that to the bees in the swarm condition, and then we're encouraging them to make their own hive. So inside a beehive, you got the worker bee, you got one queen, you got the drone, the boy, and then we mark our queens. And there's an international color code for marking. This year it's yellow, but basically the top right-hand side shows a queen bee that she's unmarked. And you can kind of see when you're looking in there, the queen's a little bit longer than the other bees, has a longer abdomen. But the one at the bottom has that blue mark. So when you've got a queen that's marked and there's 30,000 bees in that colony, sometimes it makes it a little bit easier to find the queen. But most of the time when we go in the beehive, we're not looking to find the queen. We're looking to have signs of the queen, because a beehive is an incubator. Like today, it's right now probably 50 degrees, such rainy, cold outside, windy. But inside that beehive, it's 93.5 degrees, regardless of the temperature outside, even in the wintertime, if there are baby bees inside. So if there's brood inside that colony, then the bees cluster. They stimulate their flight muscles, but they don't flap their wings. And it's kind of like how we shiver. They create heat and they keep that brood, the baby bees, at 93.5 degrees. So our colonies right now, overnight, they will be clustering and they'll be keeping our bees alive. Again, right-hand side, that's that new hive. You can see it's got 2 jars on the front. So we call that sugar syrup. It simulates nectar. It takes a pound of honey to make an ounce of wax. So we want these bees to draw out those frames that you see on the left-hand side. So we give them resources. We keep it on the colony 24/7, 365, as long as they need it until they can build enough wax. Because the frame is their furniture, their backpack, their cabinet. Like everyone today, you got up, might have been prepared for the weather. So you went to a closet, took off your jacket, so you throw the hanger away. You come home this afternoon, you want to hang your jacket up. You can't because you threw the hanger away. Well, in the beehive, back in the day, some people would have cut comb honey. They would cut the comb out with the honey and put it in a jar. Well, before the bees can put anything back in, they would have to remake all of that comb. And a pound of honey to make an ounce of wax. So the little holes, the cells that you see, that's their cabinets, that's their furniture, that's their backpack. That's where they keep their stuff. So if we as beekeepers take that away from them, that just impacts the colony's ability to thrive, because it takes so much resources to build it back. Again, that's a sugar syrup. It's a mixture of white cane sugar. We dissolve the sugar. Basically, it's not as good as nectar, but it's better than nothing, and the bees can survive on it, but it will stimulate their wax glands in the younger bees so they can build the wax and that colony can thrive. This is at the Virginia Zoo. Picture on the left-hand side, there's a full-time observation hive. I had that hive built for the benefit of us people. It's built 6 frames tall, one-sided, so you can always see the queen, because everybody wants to see mama. But again, we just talked about clustering. The bees cluster. Well, they can't really cluster in that barnyard, in that hive, so we take those bees out and overwinter them and then put them back in that observation hive. Picture on the right-hand side, that's called an AZ hive. And the AZ hive is a Slavonian design. They actually have them in buildings in Slavonia. It gets real cold in Slavonia. The other beehive you saw that the students were working on, it has an outer cover, an inner cover, then it had a honey super, then it had the brood nest. Well, this is a all one box, kind of like your kitchen cabinets. You open that door and you pull these frames out the back like books on a shelf. So I have one at the Brock Environmental Center in the classroom, and we're going to get that one installed. But I put this one in the Virginia Zoo last year, and we're going to be putting bees in it, probably a swarm next time we catch a swarm we're going to put in that beehive. And again, we're using this for educational purposes for the me and plus visitors that come to the zoo. The best. So you, me, and the honeybee, Bee City. There was a committee, garden clubs of Virginia Beach, the Council of Garden Clubs, created a committee, Parks and Rec. And I was fortunate to be invited to be a part of that team. And so this is a PowerPoint that was kind of generated to show people. We titled it You, Me, and the Bees. And it was unanimous approval by the city council to become a bee city. Virginia Beach is the 5th bee city in the state of Virginia. There were 3, but in 2020, Hampton got their application in, got recognized a few months before Virginia Beach did. So they became 4 and Virginia Beach became number 5. There's a pollinator garden at Red Wing Park. We had a ribbon cutting and a ceremony there. Basically, it's filled with pollinator plants. Try to use it for education purposes as well. But the city of Virginia Beach made a commitment that they wouldn't use chemicals, pesticides. They would let some natural areas grow natural areas. They won't bush hog it, weed whack it. But the success of Bee City solely depends upon the residents in the city of Virginia Beach and the business owners. So a few people can't do what it takes for us all to be successful. And people ask why. 75% of the world's flowering plants, 1 every 3 bites, 80 food crops in Virginia. And it keeps our world green, keeps our air clean, water, protection from our erosion. And we're seeing huge population declines of our monarchs, our honeybees, native bees, environmental contaminants, and we've talked about that. Mason bees, disease. So you've seen the little wooden blocks. That's for mason bees. Mason bees fly about 300 yards max. They emerge this time of the year. Back in the day, farmer would have a mason bee house and nail a block on each apple tree. And then as those female bees emerged, they would mate and then go pollinate a bloom and come back and lay their eggs. And all of the bees that are in that block emerge in the spring, live about 6 weeks, they die. And then basically their eggs go through the larval pupa stage and emerge in the next spring. How? Nectar, pollen, water containers, nest sites. Tidewater, as you know, has an abundance of water sources. So we try to lean away from people having standing water in containers because we find there's plenty of places for the bees to get water. But still, plants, plant native plants, allow nest sites. We tell people if you could wait to cut your grass until June, clean up that brush pile, rake up all those leaves, wait until those nest sites are abandoned from the overwintering bumblebees and other pollinators, because we have a tendency to go do our early cleanup now. And then we take those nest sites apart and we kill the overwintered pollinators, and that's impacting our ability. Native plants, 4 times better attracting pollinators. A lot of nectar sources, the bloom season, and our floral sources. There's a huge list of plants, spring, summer, fall. So we encourage people when you plant your garden, plant some for spring bloom, summer bloom, fall bloom, and then that keeps a food source for all of our pollinators through the whole season. Again, that's the bass that we talk about. Again, shallow containers are best, put rocks, gravel, marbles, whatever. Again, natural nest sites that we talked about. And a lot of native bees live in the ground. They're solitary bees. And again, being mindful of your environment. Norfolk beekeepers, one of many working to promote and protect our pollinators. We've talked about the pesticides, contamination, and looking for alternatives, natural ways. So the committee is working on a Virginia bee happy home. It's kind of like a pearl home. We want people to share what they know, talk about pollinator habitat, and support your neighbors. These are references. Again, this presentation, I believe, will be on the Master Gardener's website for your review. That's a wildlife team from the state of Virginia. And again, this is a native plants for, Hampton Roads area. And a copy of this will be available on the Virginia Beach website, as well as that swarm flyer that we showed. But this is a very good book. A lot of input from local garden clubs here. And it talks about native plants, local native plants, showing the sense of place, planting native plants. And again, it's very well done. It's a free resource. You can just keep it on your computer, your phone, whatever you want, but there's a digital electronic copy available to anybody that might want a copy. And it's got great information. And again, a lot of this was input from some of your neighbors. So I'll just go into closing for the last 45 minutes. You've been subjected to a host of my pleas regarding personal choices we all make on our own property. And primarily, we're just asking to stop saturating our environment with chemicals and sprays because you're uncomfortable with a flying insect or a critter that's providing free lawn aeration. I've realized in my efforts through Nature Matters and Norfolk beekeepers cannot sustain the honeybee colonies. It takes the community. They say flowers that attract bees also bring good tidings for the gardener. Okay, maybe they don't really say that, but there's something alarming about research that shows over 40% of insect pollinators are highly threatened globally, and that's including our honeybees. Pollinators are responsible for nearly 1 in every 3 bites of food you eat, yet at the same time, 40 million people in the USA live in food-deprived homes. Norfolk Beekeepers, Nature Matters, and Bee City Committee are on a mission to address these issues through bee conservation, education, and sustainability, and we need you. So again, people will say, well, I would never do that, but you know somebody that would. So we say the art of gardening is not only a form of relaxation, but you're creating a positive change for our environment. And basically, every haven that you create for our bees, you make it clear your stance on the importance of those pollinators. You designate yourself as their ally, and you become a leader in the movement to create a world that is nourishing to the very creatures that nourish us as well. So gardening is no longer a happy, it's a movement to promote and protect the honeybee and other pollinators. So we ask you, communicate what you heard today, get that native plant guide, get that swarm flyer, post it, encourage people to understand the important roles that our bees play in our world and our local community. And at the end of the day, the lifestyle that you save, it might be your very own. So we ask you, will you plant for pollinators in 2022? I ask you, please do it for you, me, and the honeybee. Dare you ask any questions?
Candy, do you have some questions in
I
the?
do. First of all, Frank, thank you very much. That was a great presentation. The first question we have is, we have paper wasp near our deck where our grandchildren play. Is there a natural way to get rid of them in this area?
What we suggest is go out at nighttime, put a hat on, long sleeves, and a broom, and just knock that nest down. Don't kill the bees, just knock it down. And those bees will go and build a nest somewhere else, and then they'll continue to, eat other non-beneficial insects. But that's what I would recommend.
All right, next, I think the next question actually goes to us, which is, can I post a Chesapeake Master Gardener FB to your flyer? I'm not sure what the FB is, but
Facebook
anyway.
page.
Oh, Facebook page, right.
Absolutely.
Yeah. You got a lot of
I've-
real cheers on what you did. Can you share again the link of the free resources with the list of native plants?
So I talked to Stacy and she's going to post that on your Master Gardener's website.
Fantastic.
So I've already shared those with her.
I've got a question. I don't know if everybody else has received it, but we received a notice from the city of Virginia Beach, and I have a garden that's down in front of my house, down further, but they've indicated that they're going to be spraying pesticides to limit the growth of any vegetation or any flowers or anything that could reach power lines, cable lines, or anything like that. Is there any recourse that we can mention to the city that, we don't want that?
Most of the time, the power company does that along right-of-ways because of high voltage lines. With hurricane season coming in June, oftentimes they can't get to areas and trim a tree that potentially could take out power grids. So they do some spraying primarily for that. I'm not familiar with the city of Virginia Beach, but as the Bee City Committee, we will take that and get with Parks and Rec and that group there. And so if you could forward that to, the Master
Sure.
Gardeners or myself, then I will take that to the committee and we'll go to the city because they're a partner with the Bee City Committee and the Council of Garden Clubs. So we're working together so we can get an answer for that.
Great,
Okay, thank
you.
you.
I supervise our playground at school, and sometimes we have ground bees where the kids play. Can you share the recipe or ratio of apple cider vinegar and dish soap?
It's online, pretty simple, but yes, if you want to reach out to me, I'll be glad to come out there and look at it. And I've got a garden sprayer and I've used for other places like that. But it's online, but I'd put on a bee suit and do it on a weekend or something when nobody was around. But certainly they can share my name and I'll be glad to do that. Or you can just get online and just look at natural alternative to, I guess, spraying the bees.
One person asked, do you think calling the city to get a red flag on your mailbox to stop mosquito spraying at your house makes a difference?
Nope. One of our longest tenured beekeepers, he lives on London Bridge Road, had 40 plus beehives within 30, 40 feet of London Bridge Road for the past 50 years. They spray up and down London Bridge Road during the summertime for mosquitoes, and we've never seen the impact to the honeybees. Aerial spraying by the Air Force, they do that at nighttime, could have an impact, but the chemical that's used for mosquitoes is short-lived. It falls pretty quickly once it comes out of the truck along the ditches, and it's basically coating the ditch bank water. But we've seen no impact to our honeybees. I've got a beehive at Vector Control in Norfolk, and before they go, they light off all their sprayers. And so if you can keep bees alive where they light off every sprayer for the city of Norfolk before they go spray. So that was kind of an experiment we did there as well. So, but no, I don't think it's necessary.
Being a bee city, do you know if there will be a public campaign to deter people from mowing their lawns before June? I know many people who would love that to happen.
That is part of our initiative, and that has been run through City Council, the mayor, and the proclamation, that type of thing. So yes, we're trying to encourage people to basically have more landscape, more plants, flower beds, that type of thing, less lawn. It takes a lot of energy and a lot of fossil fuels to keep these lawns cut. But yes, that's part of the initiative of the Bee City Committee is getting people talking that it's okay to have a dandelion on your property because that's food for pollinators. Grass has zero beneficial properties for any of our pollinators.
Does anyone come and get hornets' nests? They are huge.
Typically, we tell people if they are somewhere they're threatening to people. I got a call last year from a elderly homeowner concerned, but the hornets were in a hedge, like a bush, but 20 feet from our lawn. We left it alone. I just put a piece of flag. So when she was out there walking around, like flagging tape, she would know exactly where the nest was. But it, overwintered, they died. And then I went back out there and asked her if she wanted me to cut it out of the bush. And she said, no, just leave it. So those hornets, all those die. So they won't be there this year. So if you wanted to cut it down, but if it's somewhere you didn't want it to be, again, you can call me and I'll be glad to come out there and talk to you about it and remove it if it's safe to do so.
Were weed ordinances updated in order to promote bee-friendly practices?
Again, I'll take that back as the Bee City, working with our city partner and ask that question. So I'm not real sure what the city is completely approved.
Thank you, Frank. Thank you. That's the last of our questions, other than the many congratulations and thanks you got.
Yes. Frank, I think I can't reiterate Candy's thanks. This was a fantastic program, a lot of good information. So we appreciate your taking the time to talk with us. And for those of you who could join us tonight, thank you very much. And if you're of a mind, on May 16th, please join us for Sherry Kern on worms, a threat to consider. So good night, everyone, and thanks so much. Please fill out the little 2 thing poll, and we'll call it a night. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Good night.
Good night.